Kia ora, and welcome to a video that's just going to run through introducing you to the reading comprehension standard or assessment, and getting you to feel familiar and comfortable with it, and a couple of little basic things that you'll need to know before we even start looking at one. So the purpose of this standard, the reason why we do it, you could say. So we want to see your ability to read and comprehend a text. And whilst we can get some of that from our novel, short story, poetry studies, if we do it with an unseen text, it's a more accurate representation of perhaps another aspect of comprehension. So not just seeing what you understand when you're given time to do it, but what you can pick up and decipher under a bit of pressure, but also with a text that you haven't seen. So straight away what you see. And from there, that means comprehension comes down to how you can take away meaning and ideas and messages and purposes from that text. It also helps us see what your ability to identify language features and parts of speeches. They're key aspects of English study when we look at literature and we get into fine detail. So seeing that you can identify those as part of it. And then the next level of sort of higher thinking is how you can see how that use of language helps to explore those ideas or meanings and how it creates an effect. So effectively, you're looking at on the surface. So can you see those parts of speech? Can you see those language features? Then can you explain the effect of them and what kind of images they might give you or why the author has used them? And then can you take that a step further and see how that works with an idea in the text and how it helps to show that? So just sort of seeing how all those pieces work together. And effectively, when you do the reading comprehension test, you get to put together all of those things. And if you've got strengths in some areas, so you can identify the language features, you'll still be able to get marks. But if you can't explain them, that's okay. So there are lots of different levels, and you might find that at this stage, you're only able to identify the language features, and that's okay. And some of you will be able to do that and find the ideas and piece them all together. Normally, this would be done under quite different circumstances, and so you would find that perhaps you're a little more supportive than that, but that's okay. This is a different time, so we're just going to see what we can put together and pull together in 5 lessons without being together. So, what does it consist of? Effectively, you read a text or an extract of a text. It's often going to be a piece of poetry or a piece of fiction, which means it's going to be something from a short story or something from a novel. We don't tend to do non-fiction with Year 9, especially not at this part of the year. So you're going to read that text. It's going to be not super long. If you've got an extract, it's probably 200 words long. If you've got a poem, it's probably more like 100 words long. You're going to answer a number of multi-choice questions. It's often around 5, but I can't say exactly because each year it's slightly different. Then you'll answer a number of short answer questions. So those are probably 2 to 4 of those questions, depends on how the marks are laid out in the exam. They'll often ask you to identify more specific examples rather than being multi-choice, ask you to start looking at the effect of something. So those ones are sort of building you up. So multi-choice is a little bit simpler, short answer is a little bit harder, and then that takes you to the long answer, which is kind of a bit harder once again. That's when you piece everything together. So you can see how it sort of builds up into stages. And that's basically all it consists of. So now you're probably wondering how it's graded or how the marks are allocated. So that's going to depend on how it's set up, but this is by and large how it's been for the last few years. So each multi-choice question is worth 1 mark. So if you're not super strong on identifying ideas in a text, you can't take away the meaning, it all just seems too hard, you want to ace the multi-choice. It's the easiest way to pick up some grades. Then you've got your short answers, which are often, if they're broken into parts, worth maybe 2 to 3 marks. So maybe identifying an example gets you 1 mark, and then explaining the effect might give you 1 or 2. The number of marks tends to show you how detailed you want that response to be. So if you've got 2 marks allocated, you're probably going to do a slightly longer explanation than one that's worth 1 mark. And then you've got your long answer, which tends to be worth 5 marks. So the distribution for that is that you get a mark when you sort of state the idea of the piece and you link it to the question. Then you get half a mark for evidence, half a mark for a correct technique or language feature, and then your other 3 possible marks come from how detailed your explanation is. How many marks are in the entire assessment? Well, that's going to depend. It's normally between 15 and 20 sort of marks that are allocated. It just depends on what the course leader has decided and how it's going to fit in with the mark book and things like that. So between 15 and 20 marks is a pretty good indication. And yeah, you'll often get 5 marks from that long answer. What do you need to know before you even get into it? Well, you need to know these basics. You need to know the parts of speech, and I'm going to go through those shortly. You need to know what language features are, and so we're going to do some work on that in a grid today. And you've also got Education Perfect to sort of try help you along with that, and a past paper and a couple of activities to get you used to this. The effect of language features. That's a little bit harder. That's where Education Perfect is going to help. And the grid that you're going to fill in a moment, you'll kind of see how language features create an effect. That effectively means that when you read something, it creates an image, or it prompts a feeling, or it shows an idea. So it might show that a character is not happy. That's an idea. It might show that the place is very lonely or isolated or empty. That's an idea. That's an effect. An effect might be to create an image, and then what does that image do? So when you say your brother is as brave as a lion, it creates an image of a lion, creates an image of bravery, and then that makes it seem like your brother is very impressive. So that's the effect of the language feature. Narrative perspective. If you're not familiar with that, there are 3 narrative perspectives, and I'll go through that in a moment. First, second, or third person. Being able to identify them is important. And lastly, you need to know how to structure a long answer response. So that's going to be something that we'll go through in a future lesson. There are effectively sort of 5 sentences that you might do, and it's actually not that unfamiliar to you. So to structure a long answer response, you effectively do a peel paragraph, which is what you've been learning for essays, but you put a language feature in there. That's literally the only difference, is that you want to make sure you've got a language feature in there. So if you think of them as being a paragraph, which you've already started to go over, then it won't be super unfamiliar to you. So since the beginning of the year, we have covered some language features. These will be from the poems that we did, or we did a piece on what it means to be a New Zealander, and you started to create in your class notes folder a sort of definitions table of different language features. So far we've covered adjectives, which are a language feature, and they're also a part of speech. We've covered metaphor, simile, hyperbole, rhetorical question, alliteration, and repetition. It might pay for you to go back and look at those to help yourself know them a little bit better, or look them up online, but those are things that have been covered so far. The Education Perfect work that I have set on some of the more common language features. Jargon isn't, I sort of throw that one in there, but metaphors, onomatopoeia, personification, and similes are all super helpful. And if you know adjectives, then you've got most of your bases covered. These are the parts of speech. What I would recommend is pausing and copying down what they are, or if you know what they are, copying down the definition or the examples rather of those. So you've got a noun, that's the first part of speech. That's a thing. A noun is a thing, which means an object or a person or a place, whatever you want to say. So if you can see it, feel it, that sort of thing, that makes a noun. People are nouns as well. So people or places are proper nouns, but they're still a noun. So Australia is a proper noun, but it's still a thing. Right? So if it passes the thing test, it's a noun. That's the easiest way I thought of it. Pronouns are used in the place of a noun. So, for example, if I wanted to talk about a comic book that my brother had, and I was talking about it, I wouldn't keep saying Harry's comic book. Harry's comic book is over there. Harry really likes Harry's comic book. I would go, Harry's comic book is over there. He really likes his comic book. So the he and the his replace using his name all the time. So pronouns are things like he and she, them and they, but also I, me, we, us. So when you learn about narrative perspective, you'll see that the pronouns are a really good indication or tip, and they show us how we find them. So they're really helpful for narrative perspective. Adjectives, you're hopefully familiar with. Adjectives are describing words. So they're really helpful to give us an indication of something. So fat, thin, happy, sad, blue, yellow, cloudy, all of those things are adjectives. They describe a noun or they describe a pronoun. A verb, you might have learnt these in primary school as being a doing word. So they're a doing word or an action word. They often end in ing, but they are also just any action as it's got there: go, speak, eat, live, area, that sort of thing. Adverbs. So they describe the verb. They add to the verb. So if you can't figure out if it's an adjective or an adverb, you want to look at what it's describing. So if it's describing an action or a movement, then it's an adverb. If it's describing a thing, so an object, then it is an adjective. So adverbs add to the verb. They often end in ly, not always, but often, and they can help. Prepositions. These are for the position of an item or an object, which is a noun or a pronoun. So I just remember that position thing. So if they describe where something is positioned, then they are a preposition: under, on, for, anything that describes a position of something. Conjunctions. So think about the junction part of that. They join. They conjoin things. So and, but, yet, anything that joins sentences together. And interjection, this one is less common. So they're an exclamation, they're like a response, like, oh, ow, wow, exciting. Actually, not exciting, but the words that would go there. So you can see those examples that they've got there: ouch, hey, oh, watch out. So the exclamation that comes after it, the interjection, is kind of almost like a sound effect a person might make when something happens, perhaps when they're caught by surprise. So those are the basics of parts of speech. So if you are familiar with them, hopefully the next one will be pretty straightforward. If you're not familiar with them, I would pause this and just jot down even just the names and some examples. But if you need to, take down the full definition to help yourself as well. So if you're confident with those, we can move on to the next part. What you're going to do is write down all these words. You don't have to put them in a grid. It was just easier for me to be able to fit them all on one page if I did that. So you're going to write down slowly: underneath, tubby, over, jacket, screams, ghostly, quick, him, because, student, and sombrero, which is a hat, if you didn't know. Sombrero just means hat in Spanish, but we think of sombrero as being a Mexican hat. Fun facts from my attempts to learn Spanish over the holidays. So these are some words. I want you to write them down, and then I want you to write next to them what part of speech you think they are. So write them down, pause the video, and then we will go through them. Okay, I assume you've done that and you're ready to go. If not, pause, quickly pause. And now we're going to go through them. So I really hope that you've gone through them yourself and given it a really good go first. Doesn't matter if you're going to get them wrong. No one's going to judge you because no one's here to see you. Okay, so slowly is an adverb. It would describe how you would be doing something. So you would be doing it slowly. Underneath is a preposition. It describes a position of something. So the socks were underneath the bed. Tubby is an adjective. It means fat, sort of plump. So that would describe somebody or something. The pug was tubby. Over is a preposition. Climb over the fence to get there. Jacket is a noun. Screams. Now this is a tricky one, so this is why I put this one in there. Technically, this is a noun, but it's also a verb. So it depends on the sentence that they're in, and some words will do that. So what you need to do is read the sentence carefully. So I'll show you how they can be too. So she screams is a verb. I heard the screams is a noun. So it's going to depend on what it is in the sentence. So that's why if you get a multi-choice question, don't just assume you know the word. Read the text first, find the line it's in, read the full sentence, because that one will trick you up. I used to put lots of those ones in when I wrote the 9ENG exam. Ghostly is an adverb. Quick is an adjective. Him is a pronoun. Because is a conjunction. Student is a noun. And sombrero is a noun. So hopefully you've understood those. I didn't put an interjection in because they're not so common, but interjections do exist as well. So remember that. What I would say is something quite helpful to do is over the next couple of days, as you start to be thinking a little bit about this assessment, anything that you read, whether it's online or in person, have a go trying to practice seeing what parts of speech they are, and see if you can pick them up. It can be a little bit tricky, and sometimes even I have to Google things because I'm not so sure myself, but that's something that you should be doing. And lastly, before you get off to trying to do some language feature work yourself, you need to know narrative perspective. So all you need to focus on is understanding first person, second person, and third person. Now you'll see when you look at third person, there are different types of third person. You don't need to know that. Okay, you just need to know those simple terms. So first person is when the story is told from that person's perspective. So they would use the word I, me, we, our. They're telling their story. So they are the one person there, and it is from their experience. Second person is uncommon, but it can happen. So second person is when your story is told to you. So if you're familiar with, there are certain Goosebumps stories or Tell Your Own Adventure stories or Dungeons and Dragons stories where your story is being told to you and what you do. So this can be tricky because it uses the word you. Sometimes in first person that can happen. So second person, I would say rule of thumb, it's often not second person, but if your whole story is being told to you, then it would be second person. Third person, now don't worry about objective or limited omniscient or omniscient. If you want to know them, feel free to pause and have a bigger read. But third person means you are like a third person to the action, so an outsider watching it. So it's being told to you. You may see inside their heads, but it's being told to you. So a lot of narrative stories are told from that perspective. So you would use he, she, it, they, them to show that you're separate. So third person is like God is telling you the story, or a creepy man in the bushes is telling you the story. You're watching it happen. First person, you feel a lot more involved because you get to see and experience everything from someone's perspective. Third person, you get to see more of what's going on from a wider perspective because you feel like you are watching it. If you're not quite sure on this, I would look it up online or ask some questions because that one is often used for short answer or multi-choice, so it is good to know. And now this is what you're going to do. So you will find this grid and hopefully you'll be able to fill it in. So what you'll see is there are language features missing or examples missing, or a couple of them have taken out the effect. So all you need to do is fill in the ones that are missing. Hopefully you can figure them out from the effect of them. If you can't, then just ask in the channel and you'll be able to give it a go. So you're going to give those a try and then you're going to read through the other ones. So for example, this first one here, I've given you all of them, so you don't have to fill them in, but you want to read what the effect is and what they help to do. Awesome. Hopefully this has given you a basic understanding of kind of what you need to do. Tomorrow I'll be going through step by step how to answer one and going through an exemplar of a reading comprehension. So this is just the basic skills that you need to know before we start, and then tomorrow we'll be able to start and hopefully that will make it a little bit clearer. Awesome. Thank you.